So, as you guys probably know, in Epic 7 there are a ton of ML or Moonlight 5-star units in the game now, a lot of which are very powerful for PvP. You probably also got your hands on one of the stronger ones from the current Moonlight or ML headhunting event that is currently going on, where you can pretty much get whatever ML 5-star that you want that isn't too recent. However, today I kind of want to talk about the flip side of that, and we want to talk about the bad ML 5-stars in the game. Most notably, we're going to talk about the 5 Moonlight 5-stars that I think personally should be buffed as soon as possible, because they are just the 5 worst Moonlight 5-stars in pretty much all areas of content. Now, the first one on this list that I think needs to be buffed pretty much as soon as Smilegate can is Fallen Cecilia. And before I actually talk about her and why, keep in mind that this is my opinion only. If you guys disagree, feel free to just let me know in the comments down below what you guys think that I'm wrong on. I'm always open to your ideas, and I always want to know what the community is thinking. But yes, first, I think Fallen Cecilia is probably the worst ML 5-star out of all of them, and that is because she just got power crept. When I first started Epic 7, I think she just came out, and she was the best, not only the best knight in the game, but the best PvP unit in the game, and that was because of her S2 here. Her S2 gave a barrier to all allies at the start of the battle, and at the end of every turn that she takes, she gives a barrier to the ally with the lowest health. And this would scale with her max health, so people would stack her on very high health with like an imprint concentration, and basically you just have a huge barrier at the start of battle. It made it so that cleavers, cleave was like the best way to play back in the day, cannot really cleave through Fallen Cecilia's, and there were not any real good answers to barrier. She also was the only unit at the game, or in the game at the time, to have a 100% chance to provoke, which made her super strong because she could lock down a unit. And her S3, still pretty good honestly. It's an AoE attack that does very good damage, and actually gives an AoE skill nullifier, which was very good. So she was pretty much all you wanted in a knight back then. She could also hold Aureus to mitigate damage. She puts a barrier on her team, right? And she has that skill nullifier while also having a provoke to lock down, and she does good damage. The thing is, she's just outshined by a ton of knights in the game now. For damage mitigation, Crimson Armin, SC Arrowell are just way better. Even something like an Ambitious Tywin now has way more utility with his passive and his provoke and his stun and his defense break, and he stops soul generation. ML Ilyanov stops defense penetration by a lot, makes her very good. ML Senya is way better at protecting one unit, although that's all she can really do, protect one unit, but she's so good at it and she does a ton more damage. So Fallen Cecilia, there's not really a reason to ever pick her, right? The AoE skill nullifier is probably the biggest thing in her kit, but outside of that, she just kind of sits there and doesn't really do that much. Her provoke, although it seems very good, isn't very useful because right now in the meta, there's a lot of high effect resist tankier units, and even if you're against like an ML Ilyanov who gives their team effect resist, it's really hard to provoke block right now, and you're not going to really waste stats on effectiveness on Fallen Cecilia because you need as much health as you can for her barrier. Also, there are some answers to barrier units now, such as DJ Basar and stuff like that. But besides that, her kit just seems very outdated, and she's just outshone by pretty much every single knight in the game that is used in PvP in the current meta. Next up on this list would have to be Judge Kise. Now, unlike Fallen Cecilia, Judge Kise actually got reworked and buffed quite a bit, but I think Smilegate just really missed the mark on what they want her to do. Basically, she's like an opening unit that wants to be very fast, that also wants to cleave, but also wants to set up for her team. So you can kind of see they're just like 3 very different roles. And to top that all off, she's a warrior, so her base speed you're going to see isn't as high as thieves and rangers. The fastest openers like Ran, who can defense break like she does, but better, is going to have 13 more base speed, which is a huge deal. So because of that, it's very hard to use her. Sure, she can increase skill cooldowns now, but when you're cleaving, you don't really worry about this too much because of the fact that you're just winning before the enemy takes the turn most of the time. There will be some cases where this is very good, but even then it's very hard to make use of, and this also gets checked by effect resist, so it's very hard, right? Even though her S2 has this ignore effect resist for that defense break and decreased hit chance, which doesn't really matter at all. Yeah, it's very hard to land this S3 after because you also need to have effectiveness. So just very weird. They make it so that they have ignore effect resist on your S2, so you don't really need effectiveness, but then you have this S3 where you kind of need effectiveness for it to land. Her S1 doesn't really matter at all. And even though her damage numbers are very good, you're in the situation where if you just build her full damage, you might as well bring like another cleaver. It's just really weird to use her. I think they need to just choose one path for her, just be a huge hard-hitting damage dealer, or maybe give her like a speed buff to her exclusive equipment or to her base stats, and even put the ignore effect resist onto her S3 because it's better. I don't know. There's like a lot of things they can do. It's just very, very weird how her kit just kind of converges onto, or diverges onto different paths here, and it just makes it so that it's pretty hard to use her, that I'd say. And then third on this list that I think needs to be buffed is Operator Sigret. Now, Operator Sigret is a very niche cleave unit. Basically, she's used to counter barriers. You'll see that in her S3. It's an AoE attack that decreases buff durations and also gives CR and attack buff to all your allies. So very good opening ability. But you're also going to see when the target is granted a barrier, you'll ignore effect resist, which is very good. Scales with your speed as well, which makes it so that you can build her very fast and not lose too much damage. And then you're also going to see that her S2 is a single target attack that will penetrate the target's defense by 50% or 100% if they're granted a barrier. And if you kill a unit, you'll get an extra turn. So basically, she was good only when Fallen Cecilia was good, which is very funny because she's also on this list. Basically, you would bring her into Fallen Cecilia, you would S2 a unit, one-shot them, and then S3, and then your team gets pushed up. They all take a ton of damage, and you pretty much just win the game. But besides that, you're not going to really see her used that much, if at all, right? Because she's only good against barrier teams, and the only unit that had like an AoE barrier was like Fallen Cecilia at the start of battle. Other units that have barriers can just hold on to it and not use it until Operator Sigret dies, because she is so squishy because she's a ranger and she's kind of like a cleave unit, a one and done unit. So basically you just hold on to your ability that gives a barrier, such as like Meteor Cowric S2 or something like that, and you just kill the Operator Sigret and then you use it. So it's a really easy way to counterplay her. And I guess there is protection set, but protection set, you can't really predict what units are having or not. You can only really use Operator Sigret if you know that you're going into protection set, which is very, very hard to predict. And if you do get caught with your pants down and they don't have protection set, well, she's kind of useless. I think they need to probably rework her, honestly, because it's way too conditional. It's way too hard to play around the barriers. So I think they'll probably have to rework her completely to make her good. But hopefully Smilegate, cooks and makes her good with some buffs, or maybe a rework in the future. And then next up on this list, we have Specimen Sez. Now, Specimen Sez has gotten a lot of love from Smilegate, but similar to Judge Kise, I feel like they kind of missed the mark. They gave him an exclusive equipment that is okay, gives him health, which doesn't seem that great, but it's actually good because I think he's better on like a bruiser build right now. But you're also gonna see, the penetration on his S3 works against stunned and slept units now instead of just stunned. Basically, the way he works is you're going to play him into with a stun comp. You just wait for a stun from himself with his S1 or S2 to land, or from another unit such as, I don't know, SCROL, Ambitious Tywin or something like that. Then you S3 them, one-shot that unit, extinct them, and then reset the cooldown on your S3. And then you'll see that he's pretty bulky because he has evasion on his S3 if it's available, which is pretty much all the time. You're not going to be using this where it doesn't reset. And also, basically, with the exclusive equipment, he's a lot tankier now. And you're going to see from his stats, he does have okay health for a thief. So, yeah. Only problem is you need a very specific team comp around him. So in RTA, he's very hard to use. People will just ban out your stun characters or just ban out him himself. Also, he needs a lot of stats, right? If you want him to be the stunner, you need some effect in this. Probably don't want to do that, though. You probably want him to be around units that can stun, and then put all the rest of your stats into bulk and also damage. So you need him to be decently fast, decently bulky, and do a ton of damage. So pretty hard to hit all of those, especially on a thief who has very low base defenses. So even though you can get decent health on him, his defense will always be low. So it's very hard to make him actually tanky. So because of that, it is very hard to build him. I think he is, his kit is okay, it makes sense, but it's very conditional. I don't know if they can actually buff him anymore. I think he'll always be in this state where, in the perfect team comp, he's extremely, extremely powerful, but it's really hard to have that perfect team comp because, one, a lot of stun characters are not that great right now, and two, a lot of immunity in the game, a lot of cleansers in the game and stuff like that. So it's pretty hard to make him work. But I think Smilegate might need to buff him again, or maybe I hate to say it, but change how his kit works with his stuns and sleeps. Maybe it should be against just debuffed enemies instead of just stunned and slept enemies now with his exclusive equipment, of course. And just lower the damage on his S3. Maybe that'll make him a lot more consistent and more fun to use. But for now, it's pretty hard to use him, and I think he needs some sort of a change. And then last but not least, we have Twisted Eidolon Kayron. So I've pulled like, I don't even know, 4 copies of this guy, and he's gotten buffed I think once or twice, but he's still pretty crappy. And he's pretty similar to Specimen Sez in that he's very niche, except that he doesn't really need a specific team comp around him. It's just that he needs to be in a game that lasts forever. And the reason why I say this is he has a lot of text in his abilities. Basically, his S1 is a barrier granted on his single target attack. When this is a counter attack, you'll actually be doing an AoE attack, and you'll see that his S2 gives him a counter attack buff every single turn. And at the end of an enemy's turn, he'll gain 10 fighting spirit. When he gets 100 fighting spirit, he will CR push by 100%, and then he can S3. And the S3 doesn't require fighting spirit, but you'll see that it will consume it. So basically it's an AoE attack. It does fixed damage after, and the fixed damage will scale up to 15,000 based on the fighting spirit that he uses. And when this skill is off CD, off cooldown, he'll take less damage when he gets crit. So basically, the way you use him, I know it sounds looks very complicated, is you're just sitting there, waiting for the end of enemies' turns, just counterattacking and surviving on a lifesteal set, ideally not getting this stripped off, so you need some effect resist, and once you hit 10 fighting spirit, you will S3, and then pretty much win the game, and do a ton of damage, right? Problem is, this takes forever, because you have a unit known as ML Politis in the game, that's very good right now in the current meta, and she stops your fighting spirit game by half, which is super frustrating. And also, it's very hard to build him. Smilegate has this thing where they love to give thieves these like in theory, super strong builds or like skill sets, but they're thieves, right? If this was a warrior, this would be so much better because one, you wouldn't really need lifesteal set because you could use something like a golden rose, which would be amazing on him, or even like a Sigret scythe. But you're locked to thief artifacts, and they're just not that great. You can run him on like double edge to crescent, which is okay, but a lot of them don't really give him defensive capabilities, and you just need to survive as Twisted Eidolon Kayron, and it's just really hard to, right? Because he's a thief with low base stats, not good artifacts, and he also needs effect resist to just keep this counterattack on. Because it's a buff, you need to stop this from getting stripped. If this was like built into his kit like Mort, I feel like he'd be like super strong. But because it's a buff, it kind of just like limits his capabilities, because not only are you wasting stats now into damage, bulk, some speed, like crit chance, crit damage, but on top of that, you need effect resist as well. So just a super hard to build unit. I think Smilegate tried to cook too hard with this unit. Sure, he sounds very cool in theory, but in practice, he's very hard to use. This is the list that I came up with, guys. The top 5 characters that I think need to be buffed out of the ML 5-star roster. I think they're the 5 weakest ones for sure. The other ones do have some more limited usage, or not more limited usage, more free usage, but still there might be some that need to be buffed. But I think these 5 are just very hard to pull out at any time at all. But if you guys have any disagreements, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next video.